Well, welcome everybody. I'm very, very honored to have as our guest for this portion of the program, Sean McGarvey, who is the president of the North America's Building Trades Union, NABTU. Now, this is an alliance of 14 national and international unions in the building and construction industry, obviously very, very important to our industry. Sean collectively represents over 3 million skilled craft professionals in the United States as well as Canada. He's a very well-respected union construction expert with the labor, government, corporate, private sector leaders. His strategic and bipartisan focus has strengthened the livelihoods and the careers of many workers today and future construction workers, and you should be very proud, and I know you are of that, Sean. You're a graduate and a proponent of construction registered apprenticeships, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. You've led the development of the apprenticeship readiness programs, which focus within unions on recruiting communities of color, women, veterans, into the building trades. Very, very important. You've established capital strategies along with your leadership, which is a program to advance, high road standards in procurement practices, grow partnerships with Wall Street, other investment firms, and you're leveraging, as I understand it, around $600 billion or so in building trades pension funds, which is a big capital source, and we want to talk a little bit about that. You've bachelor's degree, BA in business administration, graduate of Harvard University's trade union program, married, beautiful children, beautiful wife, beautiful stepdaughters, grandchildren. Oh my God, I feel like such an underachiever, Sean, I really do. But it's a pleasure. Thank you very much. This is our 20th year. We're ending our 20th year at the Roundtable, beginning our 21st. And we want to, we don't see eye to eye on every single thing, but there are things that we do see eye to eye on, and that is creating jobs, advancing the economy, safe, healthy workplaces. And I think most recently, both our organizations, our industries, the people we represent are highly concerned about racial injustice and the things that we've all witnessed here recently. So we want to work and talk about all of that. So take it away, Sean. Why don't you just tell us about your mission? Let's start off with your mission, how you see it. I described it, but go ahead, sir.
Well, thank you, first of all, Jeff, for having me. I really appreciate it. And it's a pleasure to represent my members to your organization. The building trades has been around since 1908, and it's kind of like not dissimilar than your organization. Okay, it's an assembly point. It's a coordinating operation for the unions in the building construction industry, and it focuses on really just a handful of things. Of course, we have a health and safety operation. It's very important. We have a legislative and regulatory operation, both federally in the states and the provinces that we work on. Then we do national labor relations. Okay. Workforce development is another huge part of what we do. And then trying to be a value-added partner to as many people who are buying construction goods and services in the United States and Canada as we can, because at the end of the day, I sell one thing and one thing only. I sell the most highly skilled, most productive, safest craft workforce professionals in the world. And if I get in the door and get a chance to tell you about the people that I have the pleasure to represent, hopefully people take a second look. If you've never done business with us, or maybe you did business with us 30, 40 years ago, and you might want to check our oil again and see if we can be value added to the decisions you're making on labor strategy for project that you're building.
That is great. Here's a softball to start off, Sean. So the virus comes along. The construction industry is probably doing pretty well, just like everyone else was doing pretty well in January of 2020. And then the virus comes along. projects were shut down. Some weren't. Some were deemed essential. Some were shut down. What impact and how did you deal with this over the last couple of months?
Well, you know, when the virus really first took hold, you know, nationally, and policymakers and federal and state and local leaders were put in a position to take immediate action to deal with the mitigation of the spread of this disease. You know, we immediately started working with the Department of Homeland Security, looking at their essentials that they were going to let remain operating, then working with state leaders to see and to make sure that they knew what construction could do and how it could do it before they made their decisions on what they were going to shut down. But the bottom line on that is, you know, we had just like the rest of the economy, a tremendous amount of our workforce idled, sent off the job, waiting to see, you know, what the policymakers were going to decide going forward. But the one thing we did do, because we had a large amount of our members still working, is we looked to OSHA and the CDC for the recommendations on how people could stay safe on the job site. CDC, it seemed, you know, kept moving the ball. And OSHA, we had conversation directly with the Secretary, directly with the President of the United States, as a matter of fact, that a temporary infectious disease standard across the country would give everybody in this particular industry the understanding of these are the rules of the road that we have to act by right now on a temporary basis. We didn't get that for quite a while. So we had our CPWR group, which is the Center for Construction Research and Training. It's the largest construction health and training, safety training operation in the world. We had our scientists and our researchers over there start to crank out, you know, based on what we knew from WHO and CDC, you know, how we could operate our job sites safely, fed it out to our folks in the field. And then, you know, many contractors and owners implemented lots of that, along with things that smart things they were already doing. But the initial impact was quick, devastating. You had a market crash on top of it. It was pretty uncertain time. Not that it's really certain yet, but you know, my number one obligation is the health and safety of my members that I represent, along with looking out for their economic security. So trying to balance both was something that we spent a lot of time thinking about and working on.
Yeah, you know, and I would think that in some of the building trades, professions, skills, there is a natural social distancing that goes on in terms of, I mean, you're not necessarily right on top of one another. So maybe there's some positive thing about the very nature of the work that would keep workers more healthy than they might otherwise be in other situations. I think you also have helped fund or helped direct, and maybe that's what you were just mentioning, but research and activities in defining a vaccine or some assistance here. Is that accurate?
Well, that is accurate, but that's separate from the construction research and training, putting together standards to be applied to actual job sites.
That's ongoing.
Yeah.
And,
yes. And then we've been working with the Diabetes Research Institute for 36 years. It's our national charity, and their goal is finding a cure for type 1 diabetes. A couple months ago, as you know, the confusion about what was really going on out there, I got a hold of the only scientist I know, the gentleman that runs this facility, Dr. Camilo Riccardi, to try to have him explain to me, you know, what was going on. And unbeknownst to me, we had funded and been funding a stem cell trial for type 1 diabetes. And he informed me that right after the first of the year, of course, they got collaborators around the world and in China also. Right after the first of the year, they were very well aware that this pandemic was coming, and they transitioned most of their research from type 1 diabetes on their umbilical stem cells into COVID and how to deal with the most sickest patients that you get. It's not a vaccine. Long story short, they've made really good progress. There's been 3 international trials that don't meet our standards in the United States, but really good success there. They started their own trial. They needed expansion. They needed $3 million. I went to my board. My board said, get them $3 million. They need $30 million to ramp up manufacturing of these stem cells to distribute to hospitals and others throughout the country. Once the trials are done, or actually in the middle of the trial, got expedited FDA approval. So, it's something that we work with this group, for decades and decades, and some cutting edge operation. They are, a not-for-profit. So they will be providing these therapeutic doses of umbilical stem cells free of charge to anybody that needs them. And they deal with, quite honestly, when they use it for pancreatic, for type 1 diabetes, they have to inject it directly into the pancreas, okay, which is a difficult procedure. And the reason they have to do that is because these umbilical stem cells tend to flow to the respiratory system. 95% of them flow to the respiratory system. So with this therapy and this trial that they're doing, they're taking it through an intravenous port. It goes right through the respiratory system. 95% of the cells stay there, and it deals with inflammation and the other things that are happening in the respiratory system that are actually killing people. I had a board meeting this morning with DRI. They've now expanded the trial to 4 other hospitals. They'll pretty much be through phase 1 in another week or 2. They're going to petition the FDA to unmask. Once they unmask, they can start distributing these stem cell treatments around the hospitals that want them, and they'll go into their phase 2 trial, which hopefully will end in validation. I can tell you that their results have been phenomenal, okay? In the placebo group, there's about a 35% mortality rate. In the people that are actually getting the treatment, they're batting 1,000 right now. So, and that mirrors what happened in the international studies that were done in Israel, Italy, and China earlier this winter.
Wow. Well, that's really, really fantastic on a lot of fronts. One, just sidelight humorous thing. I hope that my board was listening when you said you went to your board and asked for $3 million, and they said, yeah, give it to them. I love that. I'm gonna cut that. I'm gonna edit that, and my board will see that clip over and over.
I didn't say it was my board's money.
Well, that's fantastic, and something really to be proud of, and something that union workers should be extremely proud of. They should also be proud of the statement that you issued recently, maybe over the weekend or something, about racial injustice, the unrest, and the protests. We're highly concerned here. I will be issuing a statement in conjunction with our meeting. We're doing a discussion about how real estate can more actively participate in addressing what I think we all recognize to be a very disgusting situation that is going on. Do you want to say anything about your statement and how you came about it and what?
No, I would just say that, look, first and foremost, I'm a citizen. We're all citizens. We all have family, friends. Our country is greatly affected by this and has been for hundreds of years. And anybody that won't recognize that there's racism in our world, in every aspect of our world in the United States, just isn't being honest or they're ignorant, one of the two. So, we've had it in the construction industry, the unionized construction industry, decades and decades and decades ago. It wasn't until we hooked up with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. To work on low and moderate income housing in the early 60s and stood up a real estate investment operation, the Housing Investment Trust, where we really started to delve in this. It took a long time. And look, we're not 100%. I don't want to say that we are. I work on a rule in my life that 10% everybody's no good. Doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs, union officials. It's just the way it is, the way I view it. But 90% of the people usually are trying to do the right thing. But it's past time. It's way past time that we dealt with this nationally, that we dealt with this in every nook and cranny of this country, to try to get an understanding that we're all human beings and we all deserve under our Constitution the same rights and privileges and protections, and they get them. And I think that, at this point where people, want to compare it to 1968 or times like that, All you have to do is look at it. Okay, look at who's out there. Look at who's working on it. Look who else is coming on board. I mean, I've got 2 daughters that are in their early 30s. They have zero experience. Okay, in the way they were raised and who their friends are and who their family friends are. Okay, the experiences in multiculturalism for them is an ordinary fact of life. Yeah. So it's so much different now that I think we're really going to get somewhere this time. And the building trades, when it comes to diversifying our membership and making sure, communities of color, at-risk communities, veterans, women, we even have a couple dozen formerly incarcerated programs where we're teaching curriculum right inside, well, we were until COVID came, in a couple different states inside the state prison system to prepare people for when they get out to come into our training programs and go to work. So we like to say in the building trades, we didn't cause all the problems in this area, in this country. And we can't solve them all, but we certainly can do our part, and we intend to do our part to make sure we're stand up and we're accounted for. Yeah, good for you, and we join you in that. It's very troubling, and our industry has been a little slow in some ways just because we're organized, but we're going to take dramatic steps, and we're going to work to address it. And however we can join hands with you on that, we want to do it. And that maybe leads into this part of the conversation. As we open up, as the economies reopen and things get started, what hurdles do you see to restarting construction activities, and how can we, help in that? How can we work together in that area to ramp up and to get things as reopened as quickly and safely and effectively as possible? Well, I think that, it was just a couple of weeks ago now that the OSHA, the Department of Labor, actually put some guidelines out for us to follow, which by the way, and probably just coincidence, greatly mirror what our experts put out and what we put into play, a month or so before they did it. So I think the number one thing, and I sit on the president's committee to reopen the government or reopen the economy. And we've only had one meeting. And when we had that meeting, only a couple of people got to speak. I was one of them, and it was pretty consistent that everybody said, people need confidence. Okay. If you want people to get back to work, if you want the economy to open up, people have to have confidence that they're A, not going to get sick, or B, and just as important to them, they're not going to bring something home to their house and expose their wife, their children, their husband, or their parents. So I think that, it's now getting ingrained with us how to keep ourselves most protected. I think that as people gain confidence that those protocols that CDC and WHO and others in the construction industry have put in place gives you a reasonable assurance that you follow those protocols, you're not going to get infected and you're not going to bring it home to your family. So I think the biggest thing for us is to promote that confidence and those practices and make the adjustments on our job sites. They've been pretty severe adjustments in some cases when you think about, especially in the real estate industry, vertical transportation on a high-rise. I mean, you're talking about people being nose to nose, 50 people smushed in trying to get up and down a building. Well, those days are over for the time being, and it's limitations in different parts of the country. From in California, I think it's 1 operator and 2 person on a personnel hoist. In Chicago, I think it's 5 to 1. New York, I think it's 3 to 1. But that's what we got to do. And for the most part, the contractors that we work with have been really progressive about it. The owners that we work for, both private real estate folks and across industries, have been very aggressive with making sure that we give people the confidence when we get them to work, they're going to go home safely. Now, look, it's going to hurt productivity. Okay. It's going to cause jobs to take longer, and it's going to put downward pressure on the costs associated with building a commercial office building or anything else in the United States. That's a whole nother problem we're going to have to deal with at some other time. That's going to be problematic, but we have to do it for the time being. Yeah. And it's step by step, and confidence, it's got to be built on confidence. And you're talking about confidence in the construction area, but we all, the workers in general, employees, businesses, shoppers, travelers, this confidence issue is very, very important to make sure that, they're not
contracting something, but as you said, taking it home to their loved ones is really something that will take time. And I think we have to be patient, even though it will have, as you said, this negative anchor on economic regrowth and resumptions. There might be something here that we could work together on. We see a potential hurdle in the financing, not only the health and safety and confidence of activities, but in the financing of activities, because capital sources, credit sources will be concerned that maybe a construction site will get shut down if there's a new wave of the virus, or if there's something like that. And how after 9/11, we saw this in terms of financing transactions in general. And we worked with the government then to establish this terrorism risk insurance program, which gave confidence to move forward. And it might be that, we're working very hard on this pandemic risk insurance. So going forward, that lenders would have confidence. And if lenders don't have confidence to lend on it, then building owners can't, go out and contract with workers and construction firms to get it done. So we don't need to spend much time on it, other than to say that I would hope that we could work on that and talk about that. By the way, I will say this: when we did work on TRIA, the linchpin to success on the terrorism risk insurance program right after 9/11, really the linchpin, was when we stood side by side with hard hats at the White House, at George W. Bush's White House, and talked about this and linked together that this is a problem, not just for the owners of buildings or business people. It's the problem for everyone who's associated. And that really helped. And maybe we've got something that we could work on in the future here on this.
Well, there's no doubt that, if something is going to interrupt, again, going back to what we actually do, is look out for the economic security of our members and their families. And something that's going to interrupt their economic security, we're going to take a hard look at it. And I'm sure I'll be more than willing to participate and make sure that, those assurances that are needed when you're going to have large outlays of capital are backstopped by an entity big enough to do it. And the federal government's that entity.
Yeah. I mean, this is not as easy. I mean, I don't want to say terrorism was easy, but it is in many ways, it was a one event in a specific geographical area. This is so much larger, potentially, obviously, hitting every geographical area at once, all types of businesses, and it doesn't go away after a few days. And so, it is something that Congress and Secretary Mnuchin did say this morning they're looking very hard at it, and we know all the bills. So we look forward to that. Let's shift, Sean, to a couple of other things that I think we have a commonality on, but you're way ahead of us, I think. Apprenticeships, apprenticeships. We've got people that need to be trained to do jobs and do the kinds of jobs that the modern evolving economy needs. And, I'm not sure we're training people in that direction. You're doing a lot. Tell us about it.
Well, it's one of the reasons why we've survived, 112 years, and why we'll be around the next 112 is our ability to recruit, train, deploy a skilled workforce. It's in our system, in the registered apprenticeship system, in partnership with our contractors, we do that. The government doesn't do it for us, okay? And it's something that we've perfected. It's never perfected over the years, but right now we spend about $1.7 billion a year on our operations at 1,600 training centers in the United States. Okay, there's one in every congressional district. And in these training centers, people are taught the hard skills and the techniques that are going to make them successful and employable on the long term in the construction industry, in the very competitive construction industry. And then for the rest of their career, they're going to have the opportunity to go back to that same training center, to update those skills, to get knowledge in the evolving technology in the industry. And it's something that we're really proud of. And quite honestly, not to be braggadocious because I didn't do this, but really smart people over time, contractors and union officials, nothing rivals it in the world. If we were a K through 12 school district, to give you an idea of our scale, if we were K through 12 school district in the United States, we'd be the 5th largest, our training infrastructure. If we were a state university system, okay, we would be the 3rd largest in the country after University of California and SUNY New York. We're 5 times the size of Ohio State, okay? We committed to the president to over a 4-year period to move 250,000 people through apprenticeship. We're blowing that number out of the water. Well, were until COVID came. It's something that it's time tested and it's true. Once you teach somebody to be an electrician or to be a plumber, okay, or to be a sheet metal service tech, okay, we know by our studies that you have just lifted that family and held that family in the middle class based on those skill sets for the next 2 generations, whether the union goes away or not. So we're heavily invested. We produce a superior product. We have a cooperation and working together with our contractors. And more, quite honestly, we've worked with big Fortune 200 companies who have large operations. They're saying, you know what, I don't want to have contractors tell me about, you know, they can't find locally domiciled people with the skill sets. How can you work with me on long-term development with craft people that are domiciled here? Okay, and we've been doing a lot of that in places in the, when you read the Wall Street Journal and others, you wouldn't expect us to be in the Deep South, in Texas, across the Southwest, right, where we don't have a lot of density or strength, but these corporate partners that we're doing business with who have determined we're value added is saying, let's see how this apprenticeship program, recruitment and training, deployment of skilled craft people can work for my capital projects and to maintain the facilities that I've built. So something that we're proud of. There's only one institution in the world that trains more people in hard skills than North America's building trades unions. And that's the United States military. That's the only one that tops us.
Wow. Well, as someone once said, you know, don't give me the fish, teach me how to fish, right? Long time ago. And that is true. And you're doing that. And that's important. I hope that there are members of the Real Estate Roundtable who are participating in your partnership, your corporate partnership on apprenticeship. It's obviously extremely important. We hear about it all the time, about a shortage of workers, a shortage of construction workers, a shortage of this, and you're stepping up and doing it, and that's terrific. Let's talk about infrastructure, something that we, you know, it's not directly infrastructure for real estate, but we understand that if you can't move workers, if you can't move tenants, if you can't get travelers, if the infrastructure is bad, you can have the greatest building, you know, possible, and it's not achieving its ultimate potential. So we've been very concerned about infrastructure, not just bridges and roads, and which are obvious, but you know, internet, you know, sewer, electrical grid, all of this infrastructure. And I hope that we can somehow get something more meaningful done. You were at the White House when they announced the permitting changes. It's something that we've been very active on as well, and some other things. And we'd like to see some more public-private partnerships. We'd like to see, you know, people say, how can you pay for this? Well, there's capital out there that wants to play, and if it's put to the right kind of partnership, we can rebuild the infrastructure, we can put people to work, we can advance the economy. And I hope there again we work with you and your great team on this program at some point. Well, you know,
It's like Groundhog's Day with infrastructure, right? It's been years.
If now is not the time, right? If this is not the time to do something big on infrastructure, I don't know when it is. If for no other reason, capacity and use of many of these things that need to be rebuilt and repaired are relatively low. And so you wouldn't necessarily be disrupting all of the things that you might otherwise disrupt when you do a major infrastructure project. And again, I just, the excuse historically is, how do you pay for it? And there's a lot of capital around the world and a lot of capital here in America that would help, I think, if we could break down some of those barriers. Permitting is one of them, and it's important. But
I think you're right. I think we can, but I think, again, I think we're getting sidetracked right now. I mean, I'm sorry. There's no politician can look me in the eye and tell me they can't do something because they don't have to pay for it. Okay. I've just watched what happened in 2018 on a couple $1 trillion. I really don't want to hear it. And especially in the middle of a pandemic, like you said, we're never going to have a position where money is relatively cheap for the government to invest in infrastructure. And when you think about going back to the confidence thing we talked about, I mean, I know Dr. Camilo Riccardi is actually on a worldwide board right now that's been stood up to try to think about how buildings need to be built or retrofitted to deal with this pandemic and the ones to follow, because there are ones following this, right? We know that. We've dodged a lot of bullets. I mean, if you think about, doesn't everybody want to get their kids back to school? Okay, that means dilapidated school buildings. That means relatively new school buildings are going to have to rethink, their HVAC systems and how they deal with stagnant air and all these other things that we know affect it. I mean, the cities and states are busted right now. Okay, and the thought process of a decent jobs report last Friday, and all of a sudden people that never really wanted to make the next investment aren't going to make the next investment because we don't need it, is both short-sighted in the short term and long term. And I'll, for one, will not stop pushing. And we're going to get something. Okay, I just don't know if it's going to be this year, but I think there's big change coming this fall too. And again, I've heard Republicans and Democrats, promise that their top priorities were infrastructure. Well, I know the two candidates for president last time, one had a $1 trillion, $500 billion infrastructure program, and one had a $1 trillion infrastructure program, and nothing's happened. I know that in 16 and 18, the Democrats, when they retook the House of Representatives, one of their top 3 priorities was infrastructure, and that hasn't happened. And I know they released a surface transportation bill last week. That's great. I don't think there's any appetite right now after that jobs report to do it. And I think, quite honestly, the only opportunity to get something is going to be on the topic of inoculating American business from potential litigation is really the opener that the Republicans have to deal with. And I just don't know that infrastructure, when they get in that limited deal-making capacity, that infrastructure is high enough on the totem pole when it comes to, last month, 500,000 public employees being laid off. We're looking at masses of cops and firemen and public hospital employees and scores, thousands of teachers are going to be laid off. So it's time to get real. Let's do something sensible. Let's keep the economy functioning, and let's take advantage of the opportunity to make not a marginal investment, a huge investment. In infrastructure from the federal government, from citizenry, and we'll do our part, on the private side to help create those offsets and the private-public partnerships. We're involved heavily in that work now. We want to do more of that. Matter of fact, JFK Airport, which has had a stellar reputation for the last couple of decades, we're partnered with Carlyle Group there. When all in about $8.5 billion worth of development there. That is actually going to take people from the community of color and underserved communities and teach them to be those electricians and plumbers on that job site through our investment. And we're going to end up with a world-class facility, which is the gateway to our country for folks flying in. So, I'm a little discouraged right now, to be honest with you, Jeff. But it doesn't mean we're going to stop pushing.
Yeah, I share the reality of the discouragement, because it seems we've heard it so much, but it is so needed. And by the way, what you did at JFK is exactly what I'm talking about: public-private partnership type things where the money can be found and jobs can be created, the facilities can be improved, and we can move forward. And I think it takes people like you and people like me, more people like you than me, because they listen to you very carefully, but, pushing and from different angles, from different perspectives about why this is important. Sean, let's talk. I think, gosh, I'm taking up your whole afternoon, but I do want to get into, your capital investment strategies area. You've got a lot of pension capital that, like all pension funds, are looking for solid returns over time and so forth, because that's good for the people contributing to the pensions. Obviously, real estate, we are heavily capitalized by pensions, public, private, around the world, U.S. domestic pension plans. How have you found doing business and investing in real estate? What's your strategy? What is your goals and so forth in this area?
Well, quite honestly, we looked at where we weren't on the playing field. And, we built relationships with the oil and gas guys, with power generation, with nuclear, with pharmaceutical, with petrochem, these other major industries that employ hundreds of thousands of our members. But where we didn't really have a strong relationship was, with the banking system or private equity or big infrastructure funds. But when you peel back the onion, we're there. So we took a look at our holdings, which is around, well, who knows what it is today, but around 700 billion for the building trades. And we said, where we analyzed what we had across equities, fixed income, and then alternatives, right? And that's when we're talking about infrastructure, commercial real estate. Now we've operated a company called Union Labor Life Insurance Company.
Sure.
Okay, since 1926. Okay, and in the late 70s, we stood up a commercial real estate investment fund called J for Jobs, which is a $5 billion plus fund. In 2010, in the middle of recession, we stood up a lot of people thought we were crazy, but we stood up an infrastructure fund. Okay, which now is about $2.5 billion and growing rapidly. But then we looked wider. We have a couple other investment vehicles that we're invested in. From the Housing Investment Trust for low and moderate income housing, it's about a $6 billion fund. And the Building Investment Trust, which is about a $5.5 billion fund, again, commercial real estate, more about buying, building, and holding, or buying properties. But then we looked a little deeper, because what's really aggravating to us is when people won't answer the phone or won't take a meeting. And when we looked at who we are and what we have, and I know you'll appreciate this, I tell people we're like the hair club for men. We're not just a customer, we're an owner. And we expect to be treated with respect when we inquire to have a conversation about your thoughts on labor strategy. Okay. And we've figured out and put together a database of our holdings. So if I'm having a hard time getting a call with somebody, or one of my local people is, and they can call my capital strategies team and say, hey, do we own any of this? They can say, well, as a matter of fact, we own about 6% of that. Okay. So that's been important to know what we own. We didn't even know what we own. And then we took that and we targeted $70 billion over a 10-year period to move into commercial real estate and infrastructure. And we're doing that. We had to go back during the end of the Obama administration and get a bulletin changed at the Department of Labor on economically targeted investing. Okay. And yourself right now, ESG is all the rage, either for or against. And we battled, quite honestly, with the Trump administration to keep economically targeted investing open for business, because there's a new rule over at OMB right now that we have not seen the text of, but it's supposed to be concentrated on ESG. But we're afraid that it'll pull back our ability to deploy tens of billions of dollars into infrastructure and commercial real estate. And we've worked with the American Investment Council, other huge players, in the private equity world who have relationships there, and let them know that, don't do anything, especially don't do anything right now that's going to interrupt the flow of capital, because my understanding is that some of the big banks, JPs and others, have either temporarily or on a permanent basis suspended their construction financing. Okay. So these outside monies are going to be that much more important. And we're partnered, quite honestly, where we really give strength and depth is we're partnered with public pension funds, okay, who see it like us, that want a minimum set of standards of who they're going to lend to or who they're going to invest with. Okay, so now you take our almost 700 billion. We've got all the funds in New York. We just had the state of Oregon public pension funds come on. We got about 6 more in the hopper, and we think in about 3 years we'll be up to about $3 trillion worth of pension fund money that's going to have minimum requirements for, it's going to want people to invest in operations that hire good, law-abiding, competent contractors and subcontractors to work on their projects. And if they can't meet the minimum standards, they're not going to lend. And I think that's good for the industry. Your organization, your members of your organization, they hit all those standards already. They're not issues for them. But there's a whole lot of this country, particularly in the construction industry, where it's been pretty much dog eat dog for all the wrong reasons for probably the last 40 years. And what it's done is quite honestly, it's depressed wages. Okay, it's made that when people say that there isn't enough folks coming into the construction industry, we'll make it economically viable for a family to be in the middle class. They'll come in. We have no trouble attracting them when the compensation is correct. So all that ties into our capital strategies. We're not hitting anybody over the head. Again, we're about partnerships, and our basic motto is this: no's okay with us. We don't like no, just like nobody likes no, but we understand it. And all we ask is when you tell us no, tell us where yes is. And then it's up to us to see if we can get the yes to get to a deal. So it's been a really good experience. It's opened a lot of doors for us.
Well, let me offer this. If there's, some way that we can help, make sure that you get an answer, we'll do that and see if we can help that. I'm unaware of this OMB notice that you're talking about, but we're going to take a look at it, and maybe there's something there, because the last thing that we do need is any retrenchment in financing, particularly construction financing, which my understanding is quite difficult, obviously, right now to get, and it's going to be difficult for quite some time. And we're not talking about speculative development or anything like that, but constructing and transitioning assets from one state to another, into a better position and so forth. And it's difficult right now to get financing, so it would be very short-sighted if indeed that is the result of what you're saying.
We agree, and we haven't seen the text, but we've weighed in with the proper people, I think. So we'll see what happens when they unmask what the actual details of the law.
It does kind of make me feel good that you haven't seen the paper, though. That does make me feel not such an underachiever, I guess. But Sean, you and I talked, and I think I've taken enough time, but I just want to put this on your radar screen again. Businesses, small businesses in particular, but all businesses are really struggling now to meet all of their obligations. From our point of view, a big obligation regards rent. And we think that rental obligation, by not being met, in many cases, very legitimately not being met, because the businesses or the people have lost their jobs, or the businesses have been shut down, or what have you. But by not meeting that rent obligation, it impedes the ability of the owner to meet his payroll. And his payroll includes maintenance workers, securities workers, people that are going to keep those buildings healthy so that there is the confidence to come back and so forth. And on it goes. They can't pay their debt service. They can't. And we've been working with Senator Sherrod Brown and others on a concept of a pool of money, a fund, if you will. And there is building support now for a rental assistance fund for residential tenants, much needed. And we'd like to see it go to businesses, a fund where a business that was impacted negatively by COVID and temporarily could get this kind of assistance. Because once we get out of this madness and businesses emerge and are ready to start hiring again, if they have a big slug of accrued rent on their back, in addition to all of the other structural problems that they will be facing, the ability to hire workers and the ability to expand businesses will be impeded. So I would just ask if you would take a look and think about this. And there might be a way that we could join hands on this, as well as infrastructure, as well as some of these other things that we talked about. Sean, I'm very, very honored that you were here virtually with us. You know, you mentioned 1908, I think, is when you said that, you know, we are just ending our 20th year. So we're a baby, you know, we're just a baby. And, but we want to work with everybody, and it's great that you're here. I want you, one of these days when life is back to normal, I would love for you to come to our board meeting or to our larger session and underscore some of the things that you said. I really would, and I think our people would. You know, there are areas that we don't agree on. You know, there are things, you know, whether it's certain aspects of Davis-Bacon, you know, certain aspects of at state and local stuff, you know, but there's a lot of things we do agree on. And I think both of us and our collective membership have the same goal, you know, which is good for America, job growth, you know, moving forward, healthy, safety places, non-discriminatory environment. You know, you've got kids and grandchildren, and I do too. Well, I don't have grandchildren, but I'd have a son that I would like him to grow up into a world that is better than we find ourselves in at this very moment. And I think you and I can work together and help make it so. Anything you'd like to end? We can all go back to our afternoon lives, Sean, but I'd invite you to make any closing comments.
Well, I would just say this, Jeff, that your organization and your member companies are a gigantic player in the lives of hundreds of thousands of my members. Okay, and those relationships are extremely important to me and to my board to make sure that we are engaging. Look, we work across a bunch of different industries. We don't agree on lots of things, but what we do agree on, we work on together. When it's mutually beneficial for the two organizations and for the country at large, we work on that together. Our political position is no matter administration or Chamber of Congress is, look, when we agree, we'll do it publicly. And when we disagree, we'll do it respectfully and privately. That's just the way we try to conduct ourselves. Okay. And that's the same way with our partners that we have the opportunity across industries to work with, that we approach it. So I think there's ample avenue on really big issues that are pressing and some that are long-term, that we'd be very, very interested in saddling up with your team and seeing if we can get something accomplished for not only for our organizations, but for our country.
Fantastic. Well, let's hope this week is a better week than last week, and the next week will be better than this week. And look forward to working with you, Sean. Have a great day, and carry on, my friend. Carry on.
Thanks so much, Jeff, and be safe out there.
Thank you.